Hello there. This is Back to the Future of Mobile World Roundtable. And yeah, so we will be talking about the basically the future of the mobile world. And this roundtable is hosted by Andriy Zhatkin, who is senior software developer at EPAM.
Yes, hello. So, and Denis Tadzidinov is our chief.
Chief software engineer. Okay.
Yes, chief software engineer, and I'm glad to present our guests. So let's meet our guests. Lea Marolt is Senior Product Manager for the Customer Experience at Azimo, driven by Amphi and Analytics. Lea?
Hi everyone. Yeah, hi, I'm Lea. I'm currently a product manager at Azimo, working on the customer experience. But before that, I used to work as a mobile engineer for a couple of years, and I also write a lot of articles on iOS development and Swift and UX, specifically for mobile. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Ellen Shapiro, mobile engineer at Apollo GraphQL. Ellen?
Hey, I'm Ellen. I've been doing mobile development for the last 10 years, which is a terrifyingly long time. I do both iOS and Android, more iOS than Android these days, mostly working on the Apollo iOS SDK. But I've done a lot of work on both, and I am involved in the Ray Wenderlich tutorial team, and I've mostly been doing a lot of book editing lately, so working on both Kotlin and Swift stuff. So I'm definitely mobile person to talk to about things that are happening now. I don't know about, we'll find out about whether I'm the one to talk to about the future, but.
Okay, thank you. Anastasiia Voitova, Head of Customer Solutions, Security Software Engineer at Cossack Labs. She's into software security and applied cryptography.
Yeah, hello.
So
crypto means cryptography. If you have a different opinion, sorry, just press the cross button and yeah. So yeah, I am a software engineer with a huge background. I started as mobile developer many years ago, and iOS 3 probably. Ellen, do you remember those times? iOS 3, oh my goodness. Oh, yeah, right now the world is more complicated than ever. Then I believe that iOS is too small for me. So I kind of switched to backend, to Android, all the things, and finally to security, because it's really cool when you build a system and you can control everything. I'm like the professional access revoke person in our company because I like to revoke all the accesses. So right now I'm doing security, like software security and applied cryptography, and do a lot of things like build end-to-end encryption into some mobile application or something like that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anastasiia. Our next guest is Iryna Kuryayeva, Senior Experience Designer at EPAM Systems. Please, Iryna.
Hi, everybody. That's right. I'm a designer, so I'm a bit of an outsider in this whole thing. But at the same time, I'm here to maybe remind everybody about, not just sticking to what future holds for us, but in a lot of ways, what should be done, what should be kept, how do we kind of keep people sane with all the technology overflowing. So I'll be probably providing some insights of that. Hi.
Thank you, Iryna. Vladimir Ivanov, Solution Architect at EPAM Systems and also content creator at vvsevolodovich.dev.
That's fine. Hi, everybody. So my name is Vladimir. Basically, what I'm doing for living is design software systems, mainly mobile focused. So I have a different experience with Android, with cross-platform frameworks like React Native, Flutter, I'm a Google Cloud certified architect, but I'm not limiting myself to the single cloud. Yeah, so we'll be talking a lot about cross-platform solutions nowadays.
Yeah, thank you. And our last guest, Elvin Rakhmankulov, Head of Mobile Competency Center at EPAM Systems. Please, Elvin.
Thanks, Andrei. Yep, Elvin Rakhmankulov. Been developing mobile apps since 2009. Today, I'm digital solution architect at EPAM Systems, leading our mobile competency globally, still helping our clients mostly to develop mobile solutions around the globe. Thanks, Andrei. Back to you.
Thank you, Elvin. So let's get started. And
yeah, one more thing
yes.
I would like to mention here. We also have one invisible guest, but not just guest, he's moderator or like our question guru. He will be taking questions from the audience. And by the way, for those of you who are listening to us or viewing us live here at that conference, we will be giving some small prizes for the best questions. So please ask our experts questions. And yes, now let's actually get started with our view. And just to make things a little bit clearer, we will be looking into the future. And our idea is to see up to 10 years into the future and see how these years will affect mobile world in terms of development, in terms of user experience, in terms of security, yeah. And yeah, and in terms of business as well. I mean, these are all questions which we will try to cover. And let's start then.
Okay, so I have the first question. So it's nowadays question. And Lea, are you getting used to Siri, Alexa, Google Assistants, and how are they performing according to our expectations? So what do you think?
Yeah, that's definitely a very interesting question. I think for a while when we originally started having more voice assistants in our mobile platforms, it was kind of thought of this like end all be all. We won't have to use any of these like phones and interfaces by touching them anymore. It will all be kind of like a voice thing, but that obviously hasn't necessarily happened. It seems like over time, though, like the purchases of voice assistant technology has gone up year over year quite a lot, but it's still not delivering on the promise of like, you know, you can just have something that will take care of all of your needs. In general, like it seems like it's becoming more pervasive. I see it in my day-to-day life from my friends starting to use these different functions of Siri or Alexa, but most of the time people, while they're aware that this is a possibility, the use cases that we currently are using them for are very basic, like, hey, turn on the lights, or play this song, or something that is like a very specific task rather than to really be helpful and proactive in your life. It's still more of a reactive technology. And I think that is really happening because for a conversational user interface, which these are, it's extremely hard to show the affordances that these assistants have. So that basically means like, what are even the possibilities that we have available to us to do with them? So in general, because you don't see, like when you have a piece of software and you can see, it's very easy to see like, oh, there's like this button, I wonder what this does, and you can try it out. And there's like a settings thing, and you can read it, and like, you know, it informs you through that way. But with voice assistants, it's very hard to discover these features because there's like an education gap in even knowing what is possible. So that's one. So not really informing users of what we can do, other than like in conferences, like Google or Apple or Amazon have. So that's like the first piece that I think is really kind of missing, that we have a limited knowledge of like the breadth of capabilities that these have. And then the next one that I find a lot of people tend to mention, and it's been measured as well, is like a lack of trust. we don't necessarily trust in two things, actually. We don't trust that the assistant will be able to give us information we need because this has a high rate of failure. But then the other problem is that we think that, or we know more and more that this data is being collected and we don't know what is being done with that data. So consumers aren't necessarily super confident in being able to use these and trust them as much as they can trust like clicking on a button. So it's definitely still, I think, a nascent field that people are generally getting more and more aware of, but whether it delivers to the promise that we hoped it would, I think is still quite an open question. And whether it will, sorry for the noise, whether it will be possible to actually do some more complex tasks with voice assistants, I think still unknown at this point. So I think the things that we need to think about here is like how can we make these like voice assistants and interfaces like better prepared and optimized for success? So like what are like how do we expose the tasks that people can actually do with them, and how can we help them accomplish them? The next thing is to do to kind of like foster this trust in terms of consistency and how well the system actually performs, and then also trust in data security. So I think we need to reach all of these things before we can actually use voice assistants to their full potential. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another
Yeah.
thing that really comes out with voice assistants that doesn't come out with other things, particularly involving typing, is that voice assistants have to deal with people's accents. So particularly if you're speaking a language that is not your first language, your accent is sometimes not going to be as understandable to a voice assistant as just typing something into a box. Even if you speak really, really, really fluent English, if you speak with a very heavy French accent, as one of my colleagues does, it's going to be really, really difficult for the voice analysis to actually be able to understand what you're saying, because it's been trained on people who are native speakers. And you can even see this like it's quite there's a couple of very funny videos of people with very, very thick Irish or Scottish accents trying to talk to Siri, and Siri just getting it utterly wrong. And you know, there's certainly been improvements around that stuff, but I think it is something where like like the privacy concerns are honestly my concern. Like I have nothing that can listen to me in my house, but it's definitely something where you know, the general public's adoption of it has definitely been much higher than I think people who are more into, you know, device stuff, because those of us who are super into device stuff are like, this is terrifying. And people who are, you know, I think of my aunt who's 72 and who constantly asks Alexa to tell her a joke. And, you know, so it's definitely something where there's some dissonance there, but I think it is something where it seems like it should be one problem to solve, which is like taking voice input and turning it into something useful, but it's like 27 different problems to solve. So it's definitely, it's trying, but there's a lot of things going on there.
I think also to your point, Ellen, it's not just different accents of English that are a problem here, but also different languages, as I'm sure that people who are watching this might appreciate. It's like English is definitely the primary language focus for these voice assistants, and what happens to everyone else's language in the world. Does that mean that we're slowly just obliterating these languages and technology, which seems like really, really bad for the world?
Yeah, and it definitely is like for languages that are spoken more frequently by larger and larger numbers of people, you have these larger corpuses and you have these larger markets for doing all this. So larger languages wind up going first, but it also is something where like if you speak a language like Dutch, which is like spoken basically in the Netherlands and a few other places, you know, that's a language that doesn't necessarily get prioritized because so many fewer people speak it.
Yeah.
Also, I think another interesting thing that I've noticed here was like we grew up with not voice assistants, but new generations of people are growing up with voice assistants. So it's interesting to see how they anthropomorphize them, like basically treating them like pets sometimes, and the way that the parents also teach them like to treat them as part of the family. So I think that relationship is something to definitely keep an eye on as well. Like, you know, saying sorry to Alexa or saying like, hey, Alexa, or, you know, it's an interesting interaction between humans and machines.
I just wanted to add to this. I would like to see truly continuous conversation with voice assistants beyond what engineers beyond what creators of those assistants actually put into the scripts. I think they're being used as a task-based. From what I'm seeing, I'm not a big user myself, but from what I'm seeing, it's still being used for tasks like checking the weather, for instance, or using Shazam-like functionality, like which song is playing. But I would really like to see continuous conversation that could be for some time. I haven't seen that personally.
I actually have a question for our small group. Can you please raise your hand if you use these voice assistants like daily, or at least like once a week? Okay, we have Dennis and Andrei and Elvin. So you use it, and Lea?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Okay. I
use it to set reminders.
Makes sense.
To check weather every day.
Yeah, and I also use it basically to while I'm driving, and that's I mean, like asking. I wouldn't like name the words now because of like some people's assistants might turn on and do something, but you can ask some assistant to read your messages and or send a message. Specifically if you're being late or like getting into traffic jam or whatever. Yeah.
Where the hell are you driving, Denis?
Yeah, well, from one isolated area to another, and that's it. Yeah.
From the house to the grocery store.
No, not the grocery store. To like out of the city house. So basically, like being from one house to another, and like basically that's it. And without stops in between. Yeah. Well,
I also use it for timers a lot, I have to say. Like set a timer.
I used to use it a lot. I used to use it a lot for timers, but there's now you can have like a complication on your watch where you can just go straight into timers, and I'm like, this is much easier.
Yeah, like same story for me. I don't really talk with Siri. I just use it like Siri tell a joke, you know, this kind of things. Or like Google something, but it's easier, it's faster for me just to tap, to click on something. Timers on my phone, reminders, I don't know, on my calendar probably, right? I didn't just, for me, like personally, I didn't find like a niche for me to use voice assistants.
Yeah, and we also have one question from the audience, by the way, and the guys are now asking, what do you think about assistants with the screens? Like typically we expect like assistants to be voice only, but now we do have Google's, I believe it's Nest or Alexa Echo Show, which have some visual feedback as well. Do you think that helps, or is it like step into wrong direction?
Let's talk about uncanny valley.
Yes, exactly. That's is that particularly uncanny valley now?
I don't think it is right now, but I don't think we are moving in this direction really quickly with all these people-like assistants with like something that displays emotions, right?
Yeah, I feel like the movie, what is it called? Her, the one with Ryan Gosling where he falls in love with a Siri thing. Like that's not that far away. That's definitely not that far away. And it's definitely one of those things where, like, you know, I think the uncanny valley thing is always interesting because there is the desire to have dialogue with these things, but like there's also a point at which like realizing that you're having dialogue with a computer can be kind of creepy.
Yeah, let's just pause this particular conversation till we get into the future a little bit, because we do have some questions related to this, let's say, truly conversational voice assistants. But as of now, can we look a little bit about another thing about this current time? So we are currently talking about what we do have now in 2020. And another sign of this year is basically work from home. So yeah, we are all working from home. And my question here is, well, do mobile devices help with that? And should tablets are now considered as like work devices? Should developers pay more attention to tablets and like focus not just on games, but rather on like productivity apps for mobile devices? Is it like this time? Ellen, what do you think?
I think that, yeah, like I felt like there's been a lot of stuff sort of left on the side in terms of iPad, where the focus has been so much on the iPhone from developers that there's some really interesting opportunities for productivity stuff on the iPad. I honestly think that part of that is that a lot of developers don't spend anywhere near as much time on their iPad as people who are not developers. I think it's definitely something where I've seen a reasonable number of my friends who are not developers be able to essentially do their entire job from an iPad. Whereas, for me, that's not happening anytime soon. It's something where, looking at what are the ways that we can make some of this stuff workable with tablets. So like if somebody is maybe traveling, they don't have to take their whole laptop with them. I think it's not necessarily, it's interesting because I think that the considerations for work from home are a little bit different from the considerations for overall working remotely. Because I think when you're working from home, you have such things as you're actually around all of your stuff. You probably have access to a printer. You probably have access to plenty of places to plug your device in, so you don't really have to worry as much about it running out of battery. Whereas, when you're out on the road looking at how things can work both on a phone and on a tablet, like that's just those things are just easier to haul around than a laptop. Especially like I'm personally think of like giant Windows laptops like my wife has. So it's like, it's definitely something where, looking at that and looking at how people are using that is probably going to be a really good idea. And honestly, I think it's something where there's tons of opportunity right now for that, especially for things that take advantage, specifically on iOS. There's a bunch of stuff around drag and drop that like would make a ton of stuff a lot easier. But just the adoption of it hasn't been huge because it is a somewhat time-consuming thing to adopt. And I think it is something where, like, I think for a lot of people, those devices are already their work devices, and what we can do is we can meet them there. And I think that's something that, as developers, there's some opportunity there that I think is being left on the table.
Let me be an opponent here. So I do have an iPad here. Thanks to EPAM, I have an Android device and so on. But what I actually did, I removed all the working stuff from the mobile phone, and I have it just a bare minimum on the iPad, just Teams, I believe. So because the amount of distraction coming from all the things that imagine you have a new Telegram message, you get it on the desktop, on iPad, on your phone, on your Wear device. And with this all work from home, I abandoned all of this. So you can see no smartwatches here. So no Google Nest, no Alexa, nothing like that. So I tried to reduce the digital echo as much as possible and leave all the working stuff, in a single place. So it's not distracting me anymore, because it is very hard it's not working from home. It's, you're locked up in your home working during a pandemic. So it's not, I choose to, no. And setting up the border between the working world and your home is crucial, because you need to switch, you need to rest to be at least effective the next day. So yeah, I think there will be a lot of people using the devices, and I find that it is very convenient because I'm editing the images on the iPad because of this seamless sync that you mentioned. But other than that, I try not to, work on any of other devices.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And like the idea, like I kind of laughed a little when you talked about boundaries, because this is actually my bedroom behind me. Like, we don't have a very big apartment. This is pretty much the only place a desk would fit. So, it is definitely something where, like I said, I think the current situation where people are like, okay, I'm trapped in like whatever size my house is and never going anywhere. There's a fairly different sort of cadence to that from previously I was working remotely, in that the company that I work for is headquartered in San Francisco, and I live in Madison, Wisconsin, which is like about a 5-hour plane ride away. And so it's something where I'm technically remote all the time, but I was working in a co-working space, and that made it a much more like office-like situation. And so, there's a huge difference between that kind of setup and people who are constantly traveling. Like, I know that when I'm traveling, I have like half a Best Buy in my backpack. Like, I definitely throw off every like metal detector that's like, wait, why do you have this much stuff in your bag? But like, it's one of those things where, for a lot of people who are doing a ton of travel, just being able to say, okay, I don't need my laptop, I only need my iPad or my Surface or whatever, that's really, really, really critical to being able to get stuff done on the road, being able to get stuff moving along. And I think it's also something where another place where that's really, really big is medicine. Being able to have iPads, they've been really, really heavily used in medicine, and there's something where people are able to keep track of stuff, and get information back and forth much more easily than they have in the past with paper. And I think that that's something where, like, looking at what are some things that right now we're either doing with paper, or we're sending things between phones that don't necessarily need to be, we're sending things between computers. Does that actually have to be a computer, or can that be a tablet, or can it even just be a phone? That's something where there's a ton of opportunity there, to make a lot of that better.
I have my personal story. I'm working on my laptop only, so only my MacBook, nothing else. And usually when I'm traveling, I just take my MacBook. I don't have like external screen, no keyboards, etc., etc. And in spring, during lockdown, like heavy lockdown with everything closed, I managed to spill a cup of tea on my MacBook, and it died. So I was, unfortunately, yeah.
Oh, no.
Now it's sitting here in my, like, maybe I will have money to fix it, but no, they told me that they need to change the motherboard. So I was working on my iPad for like a week or so. And honestly, it was quite okay. I have like 9-inch iPad, 10-inch iPad Pro, I believe, with a keyboard. It's quite good to write emails, to check, to like review pull requests in GitHub. But the thing here, I didn't use a GitHub application because it's quite limited on iPad. I just use it in a browser as usual. And I actually loved working on an iPad. Of course, there are a set of tasks I couldn't do, like compile OpenSSL again and again. Well, I can live without it for like a week or so. But now when I bought a new MacBook, yeah. Now when I'm still working on my MacBook and my iPad as a second screen at home, and that's it. This is my setup, nothing else.
Okay.
Okay, well, so let's go further, and actually another interesting question is about social interaction tracking in current it's normal. So Is it already too much for privacy, or are we should adapt to these changes? So, Anastasiia, what do you think?
Well, let's switch from privacy to security. We all know that since spring, most countries created their own COVID tracking application. And I believe that all of you have seen all the news related how buggy and non-secure this application is, and how it allows to actually track people, to uncover their identity, blah, blah, blah. I believe this kind of answers the question, right? This is bad, and this is the best we can do right now. Just create this scrappy application and put them in some countries, like in Ukraine, for example. There is actually one like governmental application that people are pushed to install when they come back from other countries during lockdown. So during some time during pandemic, people they're pushed to install this application in the airport for self-isolation and send pictures and send their location to their home. And again, lots of stories related to the application and how insecure it is. So regarding tracking, no, that's not normal. There are several ideas. There are several COVID tracking apps made by Apple with all this, tracking technology. I believe they developed them like Apple and Google together. This is a good one.
There's the technology that's actually developed by Apple and Google, but there's each individual place has to create its own application. That's actually been a huge problem in the US because instead of building one for the entire US, each individual state has been left to do that itself in a time when all of the state revenue is drying up because nobody is buying nobody's going out and drinking or going to restaurants. And so, I live in Wisconsin, which has been one of the hardest hit places in the US. And I don't think we even have a plan to build one at this point because there just isn't the budget for it. And I think that's something where that is Apple saying to various countries, like, we want this to be your responsibility, not our responsibility as a tech giant. But that also turns into, once that gets into individual countries can make decisions where it's like, did Germany decide to do one for Bavaria and one for Saxony? No, like they built one for Germany. But the US, being the US, decided to do it state by state. And that stuff is like, they're really trying to draw privacy lines, like the way that Google and Apple work together to make the COVID tracking stuff worked is very like, all right, we're going to make this as hard as possible to actually like turn this into a way to like physically track people. But then because they don't want the responsibility of having that data, they kick it off to other people, and then those other people do what they want.
Yeah, and at the end we have all these separate applications made really in a hurry by all the countries, right?
And yeah, by the way, they can spoil all the security which is put into the tracking approach made by Apple and Google. But yep. I think the question here is more, do we need to consider tracking as something which will now go on into the future? I mean, is this something which we will leave now and we should just basically accept that, or is it like too much?
So let's talk about Orwell.
Nope.
Does this answer your question? Let's talk about exactly. Orwell and China.
Exactly. I mean, this is basically what troubles me a little bit. But okay, let's put this topic until we step into a couple of years into advance. Maybe we will have some more problems to think of. But as of now, let's look into, let's say we will be looking into 2024. Like we stepped 2 years more. And well, like for me, it seems that AR by 2024 should be a thing, and it should be something which we use, and it's something which is like normal. I mean, we probably have devices for that. We have like use cases, but is it really true? I mean, in terms of user interface development or like user experience changes. Is it something we like expect by 2024 to be like a thing? And yeah, I would like to ask Iryna here. Iryna, what do you think? So are we ready in terms of like 2024? Are we ready for AR interfaces or AR as a primary device for like primary mobile device?
I think for the matter of AR, of whether it's popular and you know, any kind of technical nuances, we will have to ask Ellen. For now, the most obvious appliances of applications of AR would be just the same things that, you know, look pretty obvious, like virtual fitting rooms in the stores. And now that we're in the social isolation, some of the like live events would also help to, you know, have kind of maybe have people around, or maybe having some kind of model of a speaker when you're attending an event. And of course, the medical assistance, because there are some cases where the patients or anybody who kind of addresses their issues to the doctor, they might, you know, get advantage of the telemedicine. So, and of course navigation, but that's not quite relevant right now because we don't travel anymore. I wanted to add something more about like the privacy aspect of this, but maybe we should first listen to what Ellen has to say.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. I think, you know, what's really interesting is when I was thinking about this, especially sort of, there's been a million rumors that Apple is working on glasses for AR. And, you know, there is a certain point at which like glasses really are sort of the thing that makes sense, because you look like a goober holding your phone up in front of you, like trying to be like, what is the AR for this? Or your iPad. And, you know, there's just so much more that you can do if you actually have both of your hands free. And I was thinking back to Google Glass, because this was a thing in, I think, the early 2010s. I remember my friend Justin Munger had Google Glass, and he was like known as like the Google Glass guy in Chicago, and he just wore it everywhere. And he wrote a little application that let him basically have walking directions show up on the glass, where basically it would ping the Chicago Transit Authority, be like, what is the next mode of transportation that will get me back to my house the fastest? And then it would give you walking directions to like the bus stop or the train stop in order to get that. And like that kind of stuff is still totally plausible. And like, honestly, that would be super convenient. I think the thing that Glass also predicted from a privacy standpoint is that people think it's really creepy. You know, people just would stare at anybody wearing it and just be like, what is happening? There's also no indication of like, you know, particularly if you go into like thinner glasses, it can be harder to tell that somebody's wearing this stuff. And particularly from a standpoint of like, are you essentially becoming a part of the surveillance state to surveil everyone you see? That's a huge like moral and legal issue that people have to think about. And it's definitely something like where I do see that like glasses are a reasonable way to do that. And I think the size of the technology has now shrunk to the point where you can probably have some glasses that don't look totally insane. Unlike Google Glass, where it was like super obvious and kind of creepy looking. But it's definitely something where that makes some of the legal and moral issues even more important, because if people can't tell you're wearing a camera on your face, that's something that's going to be really, really difficult legally and morally to sort of say, how do we make it so that things are okay? And that's where I want to throw it back to Iryna.
Yeah, thanks. As far as I heard, Google actually installed some kind of light indicator into the glasses. So when you wear them, basically people around actually can tell if you record them. But the problem is that the glasses themselves are too small to, even kind of pay attention and, for everybody around to see that. And this whole thing, this kind of movement, it was started after there was like a front page story on the New York Times magazine that was telling about Google Glasses. And basically the first thing that happened was one of the, again, this is how media puts it, one of Seattle bars just prohibited any kind of glass devices inside, because they had a pretty strict policy about taking photos or or shooting videos without the consent of all the people that are there. And this is why they were the first one to prohibit the glasses. And, it ended up having the Congress actually addressing this issue to Google, like, how are you going to go about the privacy? How are you going to, go about this whole surveillance kind of thing? And there are also some minor things, like even like piracy, because if you wear the glasses, you can just go to the movies and shoot the entire film there. So basically, I think this was probably the starting point where not just the technology companies, but people who were pretty interested in technology, they started to care about privacy way more than before. And I think whatever results we have about security and saving privacy and GDPR and stuff like that, it could also partially be the result of that discussion that was initially, it initially appeared because of Google Glass and because of all its unlimited kind of abilities.
I wanted to add to this from different perspective, enterprise and industrial use. I think that has place to be for augmented reality. And the blocker I'm seeing for that today is a couple things. For particular glasses, it's a size and the weight of those glasses, so it needs to be smaller and lighter. And the price today for enterprise industrial type of format, it's too expensive today. So I'm hoping by 2024, both of these things will become more normal, less expensive, and then will be good use for them. And the use cases, they're already being used for this. So things like digital twins or training, which is essentially is digital twin used for training normally. So yeah.
Another concern would be security here, because once you bring Google-owned device into your enterprise, there are a lot of concern there that the intelligent property will leak, or somebody will use your data, and that's kind of scary.
There was a period of time when even phones were there were iPhones with removed camera. So company built an iPhone by taking an iPhone, removing the camera, building it up so you can use it on that kind of enterprises.
That's still definitely a thing for the U.S. government. That's the thing, is that there are so many possibilities of what this stuff can do. It is such a double-edged sword. There's so many ways that this could be helpful, but there's also ways where essentially just having something that's a camera recording everything that you're doing, if you're not careful, that's going to get out, and trade secrets are going to leak, all sorts of, you'll start to see, now even now you get all sorts of people sort of getting caught doing silly things on Zoom that wouldn't have really been a thing if they were on a phone call or something like that. But it's something where the opportunity for that to be for that to be helpful is enormous. The opportunity for that to be a problem is also enormous. So it's going to be interesting.
I really like how I didn't say a word, but we're still discussing privacy and security. Yay!
It's just your presence that's a positive influence on all of us who talk
Yeah,
about
security
privacy and security.
vibes. Yeah. From dystopian perspective, I am actually waiting forward for like contact lenses with AR interfaces, because I mean glasses are glasses, but imagine you can put like a contact lens with something, right, with some interface, with something. This is I watched like a short movie called Sight, I believe, about regarding this topic, that the walls are empty because you don't need to put anything in a real life on a wall, just because you can see, you can buy digital goods, digital pictures, and put them into your digital walls, right? You can do all the challenges and all this through the lenses. Yeah, this is the future I'm waiting.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not sure it was the same, but the movie was a short clip, like 10 minutes, but it was contact lenses with AR, but for dating. A person was using that for dating a girl, kind of picking her up and so on, and she figures that out and dumping him and so on. But yeah, the movie is fun.
Yeah. This was the one. Let me send the link. Unfortunately, I can't send links to all of you in Hopin, but at least I can share with our small group here.
Okay, so actually, let's talk about digital gadgets in order to health. So, like, for example, lenses for eyes, so can be used for health. And so we also have a lot of health and fitness devices already, but by the 2024, we will have more these devices, and the data array of person might improve health predictions and recommendations. Do you expect advances in our well-being? So, Elvin, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely possible. So I think possibilities are endless even today, with using like big data, machine learning, additional or array of devices that are available even today for healthcare and wellness. There are so many valuable data that you can get to even like extend your life, maybe improve your health. I know, like I think read yesterday or today in the news that, for instance, Apple is looking into continuous blood pressure monitoring using Apple Watch, and this is just one of these examples. I know that a lot of startups and enterprises, they're investing today into personal healthcare digital solutions. I heard on one of the conferences, somebody was presenting conceptual idea of time to live type of application that will tell you basically how much time do you have left, right? And I think that's technically totally possible to create app like that today with all these devices and the data that you have available. It's a different story if people actually will adopt this type of app, but it is possible.
Is there like a chaos factor for if you get hit by a bus or like?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, and the biggest blockers, in my opinion, to create this type of apps in the future, it's going back to privacy and trust. Like I'm not sure if people actually want to trust with all that data to the applications that developers are creating.
Yeah, by the way, as of now, these devices are mostly scanning, mostly analyzing. Do we expect that these devices will be actually like influencing you as a person? I mean, like they might, like, I don't know, jumpstart your heart, or
but they already,
I don't know.
They already do. My watch totally controls my life.
Well,
it tells me when to walk, when I should when I should stand up. It tells me to breathe constantly. It's already controlling.
Yeah, drinking water. Do you obey?
Well, yeah. As of now, you can like say no. Well, it's hard for you because it's like it will be probably more shaming you sometime. Like basically, no, you have to breathe. Like you have to calm down, or you have to stand up and do your like exercise. But still, it's more of recommendation. Like, do we expect like it will also like I don't know, like help with your health somehow?
This is something that American health insurance companies are looking into monetizing right now because they're terrible. But you know, it's something where you know, there are some places where they'll give you like a free Fitbit or a free Apple Watch, and then they basically take the data from that and use that to like essentially set your health insurance rates because they know whether you're actually exercising or not. And there's been all sorts of hilarious things people have done to like, you know, put their Fitbit on like some kind of automatic shaker or something to make it look like they're walking more than they actually are. But like, you know, it's one of those things where there are definitely things where like having more data about how things are going can help. Like I bought the most recent Apple Watch because I wanted the information about blood oxygen stuff. It's not too good, but it is something where I'm an asthmatic, and so for me, being able to be like, why do I have such a huge headache? And then to like run the blood oxygen thing and be like, oh, I'm not getting any oxygen. That's why. You know, that's sort of something where being able to have that kind of feedback and being able to see like, oh, okay, I didn't sleep very well last night because like during the time that I was sleeping, my blood oxygen went down to like 87% or something like that, which is not good. You know, being able to sort of take all that information and synthesize it yourself is really helpful. Being able to take all of that information and hand it to a healthcare provider is kind of terrifying, especially in the US where there isn't sort of any kind of fallback option for healthcare. There's not a single payer system. There's not, you know, you basically are sort of stuck with all commercial options. And, you know, it's something where there's not anything where if the sort of analysis decides like you are living an unhealthy lifestyle, or hey, you have this pre-existing condition, that means that if you want health insurance, we're going to charge you a very large amount of money for it. That's a thing that's already happening, and I think will only get worse with more data.
Well, it's kind of beneficial for the same time. It's money motivation to keep yourself healthy, right? If you can, of course, because
that's what
there are
that's what the
conditions, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that's the pitch from all of the health insurance companies is like, this is an incentive program to lower costs for people who are doing things that are healthy. And there's some truth to that. There's also a lot of truth to this is a great way for us to find out exactly how unhealthy everybody actually is, and raise rates for a group accordingly.
You know how doctors say there are no health people, there's a lack of diagnosis.
Okay. Let's
continue. Let's continue this topic because it's really terrifying with all these ethical issues, you know. Like as an example of all these applications, they try to exercise application. They try to motivate someone to exercise. I was using one of them to do this like at home exercises until it sends me a push notification saying, hey, life is so short, go exercise, something like that, but badly worded. I was like, what the fuck? Sorry, I was really feeling, you know, down at this point, and receiving these kind of notifications from freaking application I paid for. Sorry, no, delete, bye.
Yeah,
you know,
and that's the thing is some people want that. Some people want that, like, hey, buddy, you can do it. And some people are like, I paid you for this, shut up. And like and that's the thing is that like there's just so many different ways to motivate different people to make changes, that like all of these things that tend to be like, let's feed all of this data into one thing and then we'll have a solution come out the other end. Those don't tend to work very well.
Yeah,
at least
and
in my experience.
With things like gender bias, for example. Sorry, there are a couple days in a month I don't want to exercise. I feel bad. I don't want to exercise. But still, right now, for example, my Apple Watch, I think they changed the way how they award, because right now I can get an award for being active in a month, even if I'm not active for all the days in a month. But previously you needed to have all the days, right? Like, sorry, again, there is half of population that might have another needs, or there might be people that they're not active every day, right? So with all these biases, they're inside this technology, it's kind of really hard.
Yeah, and Anastasia, we will talk a little bit more on this in our next question. So let's step two more years into the future. It's 2026, and well, again, by this time, I would expect that well, social ratings are already here in China in 2020, but in 2026 it may be like something mainstream. And currently, mobile devices are contributing to this mostly because, like, as you said, there are some things in regards to like fitness apps, which basically said you are like exercising enough or not. We also have like social ratings in terms of I don't know, even like Instagram likes. So this person is influencer, this person is not. So it's like, do you expect that like by the, I don't know, 2026, it will be something again common, normal, and understood by everybody? So this social rating will be affecting probably your insurance, your social security benefits, or the question here maybe even like not, I can't expect that will happen, but will these ratings be powered by governments or corporations? So like we can look into WeChat in China, like it's a, well, it's maybe government, but still it's a corporation. And again, we do not now have Facebook. We do have Apple with their like something moves into social, and all these corporations have a lot of data on us, and they probably can rate us in some way. And like in a couple of years, they might decide to do that actually. And so do you think?
Oh, they already do. They absolutely already do.
And yeah, by the way, there is Apple Card. I mean, like, again, this is in partnership with the bank, but they still rate you in terms of how much limit you will have. And that you're probably, like, I don't know, but it might be that your phone activity affects that. I mean, what do you do with your phone? And like, even if you exercise enough, who knows? But again, do we need to worry about governments or these big corporations? And before we will ask Anastasia, I would like to take here maybe unusual, but like I would like to ask developers, because like we are developers, we are creating that in part. I mean, we do apps. And do you think that this is actually a problem, and we as developers should take care about that? I mean, like sometimes maybe like defending not doing these ratings. And Lea, what do you think about this? And
yeah, certainly. So I think it's something that is probably on the horizon, and I think it's rising from both, like there's like two parts to this story. So one part I think is just the trust. Like, how do you know that you can trust something? So like if there's a rating associated to something, you feel that you can trust it more. But then and that goes like if you're looking at Amazon products, and if you're looking at movie recommendations, and if you're looking at all of these things, right? If there's a rating, you're way more likely to be able to trust it better. And with the global digitalization of everything, basically, we've kind of lost that local like understanding of what trust is and who to be able to trust. So these types of ratings are probably popping up because they do provide some sort of a trust for a person to be able to like take a certain action. On the other hand, they're incredibly invasive and obviously affect your entire life. Like I remember I had a classmate from China. I had several classmates from China, but one was really close to me, and her grandmother got a really bad rating. So that meant that she couldn't travel to their home for Christmas. She had to take a bus, not a plane, and it made it impossible for her to travel back home for something really like small that she didn't amend then. So then the weird thing is, if we are putting our trust into these services, like who makes sure that they're actually accurate and secure? So like what makes it that they are actually accurate and representative of what they should be? And there's a whole lot of like biases that seem to be going into these ratings. Like I'm sure that a lot of people here have watched the Black Mirror episode. I think it's one of the first few that's all about the rating system and what you can achieve. And I think if we do go into this world, that will be very traumatizing and not positive at all. So I hope it doesn't happen, but I think we do need to have some sort of other way of establishing trust amongst like people globally, but I'm not sure exactly what that should be or would be. It does seem to me that it ideally this type of like mechanism should be trusted in governments rather than corporations, because like the goal of a corporation is to make money. The goal of the government should be the health and well-being of their people. So in an ideal world, that's where you would want this to be placed in, but at the moment, that is also a little bit rocky. So it's a very difficult question.
Yeah. And I think the Chinese system is definitely an example of why entrusting it to a government can be really problematic, because like there's stuff where even even something really silly like, oh, like you ran a red light or something. If you do that, then that means then you can't travel outside of China for like 6 months or something. And there's all of these things that tie into to each other, and it's sort of something where it sort of does the punishment fit whatever the crime is. And then there's also in the Chinese system, saying bad things about China is one of the things that can really get you knocked down in their system. And so it's something where it's used as a way to sort of ensure that speech is regulated. People aren't saying bad things about China, and that gets really problematic really quickly. And I think it's something where you also have sometimes racial bias built into it, particularly in China around the Uyghurs. In the U.S., we've had all kinds of problems with issues around AI and computer vision, dealing much better with white people than with Black, Latino, Native, other BIPOC people. And it's something where, I think one thing that we have that we have a responsibility to do as developers is to try to avoid encoding our own biases into the system. And some of that sort of requires examining what your biases actually are, because I think there's some stuff where you're like, well, that's not a bias, that's just a fact. It's like, is it though? And I think it is something where making sure we're doing that, and then making sure in particular, like when we're collecting data, like, are we just collecting it proactively just so we have this giant mass of data that eventually we can hire data scientists to go through and maybe find a way to make $5 more an hour? Or is it something where there's clear and necessary business use for what you're collecting? Or is it just sort of something to make the marketing department's job slightly easier? And that, I think, is where developers can push back against that stuff, because, honestly, like when people ask you to integrate a new SDK, being able to examine that SDK, what does it collect? What does it do? What is the at least ostensible purpose of this company? What are they saying they're doing? And then what is their SDK actually doing? There was a big issue recently where there was an SDK that was just sort of like, oh yeah, we're helping you target ads. And it turned out they were actually selling location data to the United States government. about, and it was like inserted in a number of applications that were like primarily targeted at Muslims, like a thing where it was like, oh yeah, this is like a compass that'll help you pray towards Mecca. It's like, oh, also it's going to upload all of your information and sell it to the CIA. Thanks. You know, this stuff sounds like conspiracy theory stuff, and you know, obviously there are some days where it's hard to know what's a conspiracy theory and what's reality, but it's like there is concrete evidence that this is stuff that's been happening. And being able to, as a developer, say, I'm going to take the responsibility to make sure that my users' data is, to the absolute extent that I possibly can, not being misused. That's a big step that you can take to protect your users. And personally, I think it's one that we're morally obligated to take. There are plenty of people who disagree with me, but you know, particularly if you're in a position where you have the ability to say no, and there's not that many other people who can say yes, you have more leverage than you think.
I would agree with Ellen that I wouldn't trust government, that's for sure, neither China nor United States here. I wouldn't trust corporation too. So I think if we have to have rating system here, it should be something distributed, decentralized, maybe something like blockchain. I'm not saying it should be based on blockchain, but something similar in that direction.
And what happened with blockchain kind of systems? 51%
in the first place
attack. I'm just saying that if you control 51% of nodes, you control the system. Here you are.
Iryna, what were you saying?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
why
Iryna?
have the rating system in the first place? I mean, I understand that insurance companies might need it. But again, like, this is what started in China. It was started by the banks, and this was the system that was called to help the bank decide which percent they can give, like, to a certain customer if they are given a loan, if they loan money. But you know, several years in, and there is this entire social rating that now affects like every side of their life. So I mean, blockchain maybe as a technology per se, fine, but do we actually need to even go in the direction of any kind of ratings?
Yeah.
This
it's a difficult
question. Sorry.
Well, and I think one thing that you often see with any kind of rating is that a rating that is designed for one thing winds up getting applied to other things.
Exactly.
So as you were talking about with, you know, should a bank give someone a loan with a certain percentage interest rate? In the United States, there's a thing called a credit score. And that's something that in general is designed to figure out whether someone is actually going to pay you back or not if you borrow money from them. But it is something where more and more employers are actually looking at somebody's credit score and using that to decide whether to give them a job, because they've decided that somebody with a good credit score is more trustworthy, even though there's not really all that much evidence for that. And so it's something where I think that's always the thing that's really hard about anything where scores are given and reviews are given, is that A, it can be abused, and B, it can also just be moved into use for something that is so unrelated as to be completely useless. And yeah, I think that's something to be worried about around any rating system.
It's true.
And I think many systems starts as optional, as something you can have, and then slowly they become like requirements, like country requirement, government requirements, that you need to have it right now.
Yeah, thank you, Anastasiia. Thank you, Ellen, Iryna. Also, I want to look in 2028. So, and So in 2028, our existing phones will be seen as vintage, and totally new UX is already here in 2028. So how it will look like, and we'll still use our hands, maybe a voice or something like that. So Iryna, how do you think?
I think, and I do hope that by 2028 we'll have like some major or significant progress with accessibility, inclusivity, because I think Apple in particular, they are, they've done some significant progress already, because they do provide the Braille language, like this is a language for blind people, keyboard on their phone. So you don't really need any kind of special case or whatever. You are using the regular iPhone. So I really hope that this will be a sort of a direction to go to. From the UX standpoint, we might be thinking about, some new form factors and the new types of the displays. Mostly, I think the foldable displays and flexible displays. And this is something that is predicted to be like a hell for any developer and for the markup developers who work on, say, responsive websites. But, this does make sense, because it does make the mobile phones more mobile, because, again, like if we check the phones right now, they are pretty big. They are thin, but they are quite big. A lot of them have got like some large screens. So if we have something foldable, if we use the phone as a bracelet, for example, or something that will not be afraid of folding, this is a totally different story. Another direction is so-called ambient or glanceable displays. It's mostly used for the devices that only serve some sort of purpose. Like, for example, if you're watching the stock market, and like figuratively speaking, what you can do is kind of have an application and have something like a single like device that kind of changes color. And you can set it in such a way that if, I don't know, some stock prices reach a certain price, like it will change the color. So you don't actually check your phone, but you have this like super intuitive and super like so-called pre-attentive way when you don't really process that something changed, because like this is just a direct kind of message, like a color changed, you need to take action, stuff like that. Another thing that accompanies this is so-called spousal acceptance factor, because if we talk about some kind of glanceable interfaces that are used in the mobile phones, if you get a message, like some important message, but you don't really, you don't need to enter the application to check what's coming in, but I don't know, like some big image just comes up. So people around you, might start asking questions, what the hell that means. Another thing that might be a major factor is the 5G impact, because this is a standard that's coming up, and which means that there could be like a big like growth in mobile gaming and augmented reality, again, because this all requires a lot of traffic. And because it's so much energy, this is not really related to the interfaces, but something called like over-the-air charging, wireless charging, this will take place a lot, because we should be moving in that direction. We should not depend on cables that much. Another thing that I wanted to highlight was maybe the holographic displays, something we've all seen in Star Wars. Apparently, corporations like Apple do have some kind of patents to some kind of product technology that might work like this, because back when iPhone 6 generation was presented, there were already rumors that they do have some kind of technology that allows to somehow combine the mobile phone with some other screen, and they kind of can bring some sort of a holographic kind of image. So I think we'll be moving in that direction. And again, in the reality of COVID, mobile devices might also help with the education. I mean, right now we're all stuck at home, but the education process might also suggest some personal research or field trips, and you're encouraged to take photos to somehow process the new information. So it could impact the education of kids too. So I think this is just the highlights.
Yeah, well, I would also like to ask, do you see that these changes in the user experience, will they be also focused for accessibility? I mean, we see that like mobile phones are now focusing on accessibility and driving actually other technologies as well. So we see more of these things getting into devices. Do you see that, well, in the like 2028, it will be like better world for everybody? Will it be more inclusive, or?
Well, we should strive for it, because as far as I know, a lot of organizations who have portals or some kind of websites that should be accessed by the wide public, they do need to match WCAG AA standard that is called to provide accessibility not just for people who are short-sighted, far-sighted, colorblind. I mean, accessibility and color blindness, these are like the two things that come together, right? But in reality, these kind of standard, WCAG AA standard and AAA standard, are called to have the interfaces accessible to people with, like to numb people who, cannot really perform any gestures, people with some memory issues and stuff like that. So there's a lot, there are a lot of measures taken already, but these kind of standards are not widespread. I mean, if it's a government site, I mean, they need to do it because this is something like, I think, a law or some kind of general recommendation, or they could, kind of enforce it. The rest of the stuff, it's not that simple. I mean, most of the times that people with seeing impairments, they usually kind of demonstrate the capabilities of the Braille keyboard on the iPhones using the Twitter. But in fact, to enable that keyboard, they need to take 20 steps inside the settings. So it does make sense to, for now, we do have some accessibility kind of tools, but there is kind of a steep kind of curve to be able to kind of enable them to switch them on. So I really hope that this will happen in the future.
Yeah, I would also like to ask our developers, do you see that do you see the interest for accessibility features, first of all, and do you think that we as developers will be able to deliver better apps, better experience? Let's put it that way in the future. So will we be more accessible, more inclusive?
Sorry to interrupt, Danis. It's 2020. It's almost 2021. Are we still discussing if accessibility is needed?
No. It's not if it needed. I mean, will it be better? Will we have better technologies? Will we have better, I don't know, experience at all? So currently we can do something, but I think it's still not enough. I mean, from my perspective, even if we use all we have from the platforms, but will new experiences be targeted for everybody? I mean, like just voice interfaces, or like the device you will be having in your pocket will be adapting to you in terms of how you interact, and that won't be called accessibility. That will be like something like normal thing. So you can use your device differently and still have full potential of that device in your hands, or not hands, I mean. So
yeah, I think there's some interesting stuff happening there, because I think I think this is actually someplace where all of the research that's going into voice assistants is actually going to come in and be helpful for accessibility. I'll give the example that, so my wife has a wrist condition, and she has used Dragon Dictation to write everything that she does, including her PhD thesis and multiple like 40-page academic papers. So it's sort of one of those things where that level of technology is there, but like being able to more easily and more quickly go through things with your voice is something that is really starting to happen. But I do feel like as there's more research into voice analysis and being able to sort of tell, okay, what is this person saying? What is their intention on that? And then there's some use of like machine learning to be able to sort of say, okay, if somebody is looking at this, they're more likely to want to do X versus Y, and be able to offer those sort of proactively as options. There's a lot of stuff that I think is going to be improved, but I do feel like a huge piece of it is making sure that developers are actually taking this stuff into account. And I think a big part of that is going to actually wind up being legislation and court findings. In the US, there was a finding that I think it was Domino's Pizza had to make their website accessible as a way of complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I think things like that are going to be coming both from the US and the EU, I think, quite a bit in the next few years. And I think that's going to spur a lot more compliance and a lot more thought around how do we make stuff workable for everyone. And I think there's definitely some stuff. I'm working on tech editing a book about accessibility right now. And it's really, really striking how many of the changes to make the app more accessible also make the app easier to use for sighted and users who don't have any disabilities. It's something where thinking through the clarity of use of something honestly gets you a lot closer to something that's accessible than simply just throwing as much technology as possible at it. So I think there are definitely ways that will improve, but I do feel like having both the carrot of the better technology and the stick of more regulation is the thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. Lea, what do you want to add something from the developer perspective?
Yeah, sure. So I think what Ellen says definitely resonates, that these things aren't necessarily like, developers generally work at companies and they generally work on things that they don't decide on. So if this type of stuff, accessibility, is not really prioritized from some top level directive, it's not something that really has time to get implemented, or it's really put on the sidelines. So right now, I think there are a lot of companies that have products that aren't accessible because it's just not a priority. So because the company doesn't necessarily have enough resources or money to spend on that, and they prioritize different things that can be monetized rather than accessibility. So looking at bigger companies like Microsoft and Apple, for example, they do a really good job at making sure that they make products that are accessible, like with their gaming console, for example, for Microsoft. I come from a master's study where I had a couple of colleagues working on this this thing called DOTS, which was basically a way for people who don't have the neurotypical ability of using hands and legs. How do they interact in virtual reality? So they created this way of everyone being able to kind of use the body parts that they have to calibrate them with like 3 parameters that allow them to like zoom, move, and I think another parameter. And that recently won like a whole bunch of awards, and they were up against Neuralink for the Design Award, which is this design award for user experience and different like cool new interfaces. But it's definitely something that's getting a lot of attention and priority because it does, just like what Ellen said, like making things usable by people who don't have all abilities definitely makes the service better usable by everyone.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, this might be a question to everybody. So as Andrei said, like we expect that current phones will be like something vintage or like something from the past. What do you think we will be carrying with us in our pockets? So will it be like, I don't know, flying phones, which will like drone nearby, or will it be something, I don't know, you will have the port in your brain like to connect the device? So
I really hope we continue using something tangible because I think as human beings, we really like to touch things. We have our hands. It's very important for us to feel like a physical sensation. So I don't believe that there is a world that is acceptable or useful or usable in like a no screen or no physical item device. So I'm sure that phones will still exist. Maybe they won't be called phones and they'll be called something else, but the interaction devices that we use will still be physical.
Yeah, I think, you know, the idea of like drone phones is kind of funny. But honestly, like I don't want my phone flying up in the air at random. I feel like that's a really awesome way to break it. And you know, the idea of like a Neuralink thing is certainly something that's been like sci-fi for ages. I think when it gets down to it, the idea that you're going to actually implant something in your body, the number of people willing to do that is not high. Particularly if it's something where it's like, okay, we're just going to hook this up to your brain. And like, I don't know, as someone who regularly reads a lot of tweets from people that say computers were a mistake, I feel like connecting a computer to your brain is a huge mistake. And you know, it's definitely something where, you know, I think there's a lot of stuff that people want to do to try to make it sort of easier to get thoughts out of your brain and into your phone. But I think there's a certain process of that is really, really difficult to process and predict. And that's something that, you know, even for the few people who are willing to like drill a hole in their head and have something hooked up to their brain, I think that's going to be really, really, really a difficult sell.
What about just putting chip under your skin without going to the brain?
Yeah, that's certainly something that some people are more willing to do. You know, it's funny, like we just got a new cat feeder where the cats have the RFID chip on their neck, and that's for if they get lost. But the other thing it can do is it can actually, the feeder sends RFID signal out and it bounces off the thing, and then it can figure out which cat is trying to eat the food and whether it should open the door. You know, like that is something where we are willing to do this to animals. There is something where like, I think there has to be a clear proven benefit for it, for people to do something that involves putting anything in their body. Because I think, you know, like this is why people are being just so psychotic about about COVID vaccines, is they're like, this is a tracking chip that they're implanting in everyone. And, you know, it's like, people, you're already being tracked by your cell phone constantly. Like, we don't need a chip. And, you know, it's something where there has to be some kind of thing where going through the process of physically altering your body actually has some kind of tangible benefit for you. And, you know, there's certainly a lot of dystopian things about like, well, if you don't do this, then you can't do X, Y, and Z. But yeah, and then, you know, I think, you know, I think one of the questions in here is like, are we just all going to be sitting in our room with our VR glasses and never interacting in person? I think COVID has basically proven that no, because we are all losing our minds because we have had very little contact with other humans. Like, I'm a huge extrovert and this has been really, really hard for me. But, you know, I even talking to my mother-in-law, who's a huge introvert, who really genuinely does not like hanging out with people other than her family, she's losing her mind too. And it's something where people need that in-person contact. And I think these last few months have really, really proven to a lot of people how much we need that. And I think that the idea that that's just going to change because we have like all of these, you know, it's better because we have Zoom and we have all this other stuff, and maybe it'll be better if there's more like AR and stuff, but like there's absolutely no substitute for interacting with people in person. And I think these last few months have conclusively proven that, even with the helpful pieces of technology to make it feel less terrible, there's no substitute.
There's actually a separate set of hormones that is generated when you kind of interact live, and no Zoom or Skype can actually replace that. And this is why it's so hard for everybody, because we don't actually we're missing on some hormones that we usually used to get having some kind of daily live interaction. And this is why it might be helping. And one thing that I wanted to add about like how the mobile phone might look like, instead of maybe inserting any sort of chip under your skin, there are actually some existing solutions like interactive rings. So you basically can use your finger to, just carry that chip with you all the time. It's not like you will lose it every day, or it's not like you will leave it somewhere, because like it's a ring, it's like a piece of a jewelry, and it already can work as an electronic purse. You can actually pay with it. And this reminded me of a story of some Australian guy who got so sick and tired of losing his like this kind of monthly pass for public transportation. He basically inserted it under his skin, but it was like a full-sized like card, because it was all magnetic and stuff. But I mean, that doesn't make any sense if that format or the I don't know, something changes about this card. They decide to get rid of it. They decide to go with an application. Like, what is he gonna do? Like, this is crazy. I mean, some people are just, like to take experiments. They might like some body modifications. They might think about Neuralink, that's for sure. But there are some solutions that allow you to, for some actions like making a payment or answering a call quickly, we've already got Apple Watch or any kind of smartwatch, like it does it, so you don't need to grab your phone, you need to look for it, or even the rings. So that was my idea.
There is a community. There is a community in Northern Europe with Oslo. In Oslo, I believe, that are fond of body modifications, and they do integrate small chips in their hands here, really small NFC chips, and they use it to pay in metro, etc. And the integration procedure, I had a chance to do it, but honestly, I was like super scared. I asked them, hey, if on some point I would like to get the chip out, what should I do? Because the integration procedure, it's easy. It's like, the injection, like a second or so. They use similar chip format as we integrate to our pets, right? So I asked how to get it, and they told me that you need to go to a piercing person or to a surgeon to get it. So I was like, no, the risks are too high. So, but they use it. They integrate it here on this piece of muscles here, and you don't feel it usually, so it's really small. Also, there are people that integrate magnetic pieces into hands. Like, imagine you can put like any metal thing here, and you now have magnetic sense, and the thing will be here like a knife. You can put your knife, and it's here. And the question arises, continuing the topic about dystopian future, right? If someone will integrate the magnetic strips into their fingers, they start feeling magnetic fields, right? And this is not something humans tend to feel normally. So if this person a human, or how many modifications they need to add into their body, lenses, all these devices like glucose monitors, etc., to still be counted as humans.
There's actually an interesting foundation called the Cyborg Foundation that I think is fighting for rights for people who do blood modifications, because as we mentioned before, like insurance is a big part of any of these like health tracking systems and ratings. And when you do something like that to yourself, then that means that your health insurance goes to shit, basically. But there's a lot of people who are experimenting with these modifications, and I've met a couple. I think the most famous one are Moon Ribas and Neil, where I think Moon implanted a chip that in her elbow that helped her feel seismic activity, so earthquakes across the world, and then do dance performances based on that. And for Neil, he had like a thing on his head that helped him like be more synesthesiac. So feel colors or see colors based on words. So, you know, I feel like for this type of stuff, it's to each their own, but as long as nothing is enforced, it's okay.
Yes, thank you. Actually, about experiments and about so for a long time, scientists have been trying to make digital mind, so artificial intelligence, and so let's imagine that now is 2030, and will artificial intelligence replace some existing jobs, or will AI create apps instead of developers? So, Vladimir, what do you thoughts about it?
That's a great question. I want to say that I just finished a book by Stephen Hawking. So it's called Short Answers for Big Questions. And he's touching a lot this AI thing. And he's not concerned about, will the AI will be building applications and replace, the programmer's job. I think that's already happening right now. So there's this GPT-3 service that is capable of already doing a lot of programming work. For example, like building websites with React, and you just described that you want an input field and a button. It builds a valid React code for you, or it's capable of creating unit tests for your code. So you just give it the code and get like valid purposely unit tests. The big concern here is, again, if that we build such an advanced AI so it will be able to learn by itself and surpass the human intelligence at some point, that might be a big concern for the humankind in a big picture. And you might be funny about this and amused by that fact, but there is actually a community of people, and Elon Musk is part of this community, that are really concerned about the future power of AI. And I would agree with that it not only will be like building applications or replacing a lot of jobs here, but it actually may be a very powerful, and it might not be an ally for the humankind. So we need to imply some restrictions now already.
So we continue our dystopian topics, and now we're into technological singularity kind of thing, right? Let's discuss, Hawking, Nick Bostrom, like Elon Musk, and the ideas.
Are we on Terminator 1 or Terminator 2 at this point?
I think that's actually the opposite. This will happen sooner than 2030. So I think a lot of clerical jobs could be replaced even today, or definitely tomorrow.
So I'm actually going to disagree with that. I think that there are definitely going to be some jobs that are able to be replaced, but I think it's also something where other jobs are going to be created to sort of essentially tend these systems, because again, like it's a garbage in, garbage out problem. You know, if you are asking something that doesn't have the power of independent thought to make decisions, it's going to make decisions based on what it already knows. And you know, it's definitely something where that can lead to some pretty significant mistakes and errors. And I think it's something where, you know, you've seen this with in the US, there have been a couple of places that try to do sort of like machine learning powered crime sentencing. And, you know, they look at, okay, what are the various things about this person, and should this person get a longer sentence or a shorter sentence, or should they get like diverted into a drug treatment program or something like that. And there's all kinds of stuff that's just built in there as biases, where it may not be an explicit bias. It may be, oh, well, it's looking at the zip code that this person is from, but then that zip code, because of years of discriminatory practices, is like way more heavily people of color than it is white people. And so they'll look at somebody from a different zip code that's heavily white, and they'll make different decisions about that, even though it's not explicitly about what things are happening. I think that obviously AI and machine learning is improving really, really, really quickly. But I think there's a lot of, and there's definitely a lot of sort of menial work that's going to be harder. But like, I think you look at something like Amazon, where they have like 1 gazillion robots to help them run all their warehouses. They still need people. They still need people to do a large number of the tasks that they have. And there's a bunch of stuff where, you know, yeah, there's pieces where they're trying to make that like less people, but there's never, it's going to be very, very difficult to have it be 0 people. And the more complex you make the systems that you're using, the more people you're kind of going to need to sort of supervise those systems. And, you know, I think it is something where, obviously a lot of the jobs that are kind of on the line are ones that are lower skilled, but it's also something where the other thing that I've seen in terms of like, oh, well, will this replace programmers, is that like anytime that we make it easier to write programs, that doesn't result in programmers getting replaced. It results in programs becoming more complex. You know, it's something where, you know, even from a standpoint of like Apple introducing collection views or something like that, like basically the time people spent making a bunch of custom UI, they went and used that time to do something else. You know, it's something where, you know, I think there's just going to be a certain level of creativity that really is, I would be really surprised if that ever gets replaced by AI. And, you know, and I think I also draw a pretty significant distinction between machine learning, which is improving really significantly and really quickly, and AI, which I think is somewhat different. You know, AI I look at as something that can sort of think about things independently, rather than sort of, okay, you have to feed it all this information and then go from there. And it's something where I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch over the next 10 years, is sort of like what is possible in terms of having something that can have these independent thought processes. And is it gonna, you know, be like, you know what, half people like dogs and half people like cats, so let's invent a dog cat? Or is it going to be something where it's actually coming up with like ideas that are actually helpful? You know, is it going to be figuring out, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, you know, we're going to be able to like reduce carbon emissions a bunch, or like, you know, and that's something where, honestly, like that's a place where I think a lot of this stuff honestly needs to be applied, rather than anything else. So.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And this would be the last question. And for this one, I would like to ask everybody. And So it's 2030, and yeah, we couldn't skip our trip to Mars. Well, we can expect that would happen by that time, and there will be some people there. And my question to everybody would be: so, what mobile devices these new, like, first people on Mars will have with them? So, will they be having like phones, or will it be something like more of utility rather than like fun? But still, I mean, if that will be a colony on Mars, they will need something like which will represent like normal life. So what do you think? And let's again, I like asking developers actually, being one of them. So Lea, what do you think? So what mobile devices will like these first people on Mars will have with them?
That's an interesting question. What mobile device will they have? Will they need a mobile device is the first question. Like, why do we assume that that's something that they might need? I don't know, maybe we'll create a completely different way of interacting. Are we trying to interact with people back on Earth? Are we trying to interact with each other? I think I find it unlikely that in 2030 we'll be able to colonize another planet very successfully. But certainly an interesting debate. Yeah.
Okay.
I think some of it.
Do you think? Yeah.
I think some of it depends on like what what the purpose is. Like, there's a reason that astronauts who are like working outside the International Space Station are not working on tablets, because they're wearing these humongous spacesuits that, like, you have these, you have your hand, and your hand is in this giant glove where you can basically have about that much flexion, and like trying to use anything with a touch screen is a disaster. So, it's something where, okay, are you talking about like, okay, let's go out on Mars and then like take our smartphone out of our pocket and take a picture of Mars rock? That's something where, I think there's going to be much more purpose-built stuff for that. And particularly because, anything that has to go to Mars specifically has to be really dust resistant because of the iron ore dust that's out there. I think it's something where I don't think it's even a question of like what kind of technology are we taking to Mars. I think it's also worth looking at what kind of technology are we taking to all the corners of the Earth? What kind of technology are people who are in areas that don't have really high internet connectivity? Like we're seeing stuff right now where in cities you can get this millimeter wave 5G stuff where you can download over a gigabyte of stuff in a minute. There's areas in even in the rural United States where you can get like maybe 30 megs a second, and that provides really different experiences for people in all those areas. And I think seeing what's happening, particularly with like the Starlink and the sort of competing constellations of satellites that are trying to bring high-speed internet to less populated areas is one thing, but it's also something where it's just like at a certain point, how do we bring up the level that everybody is using? How do we bring up that level of tooling that everybody can use to like make their lives better? What are the pieces that like there's some really cool shiny stuff that we can do, but there's also really simple things that can happen to make life easier. Like, honestly, one of the reasons I got into doing mobile development is I remember reading about some farmers in Africa where they would have to walk like 10 miles to sell their goods, but they wouldn't find out what the price of the goods were until they actually got there. And at a certain point, if you've just walked 10 miles and the price of the goods is not worth selling, you've done a 20-mile round trip and you're exhausted and you've lost money. And then just simple SMS, they're able to text somebody who's at the market, say, hey, what's the price for this today? And decide whether or not that 20-mile round trip is worth it. And, just looking at something that simple, I sort of looked at that and I said, if we can do that with SMS, if we have other mobile technologies that we're able to really get out into the world, there's a lot more we can do to help make people's lives better. And I think for me, that's a much more interesting question than like, what am I bringing to Mars? Other than like everyone, because we're messing up this planet pretty badly. But like, you know, it's that I think
like
is
we
something
do, yeah.
yeah. That's definitely something where I think that's as much of a question of, you know, what are people who are in remote circumstances, whether it's, you know, floating around on Mars or in a remote part of Earth, what are those things going to look like in 10 years?
Dennis, was that question iOS versus Android?
More or less so, yeah.
Yeah. We will need another one like Mars OS.
Yeah. So yeah, by the way, Vladimir, will you go to Mars? Will you take something with you? I mean, in terms of mobile devices?
I'm too old and too stupid to go to Mars. I mean, the next 10 years, there will be a lot of really difficult tasks to solve on Mars. So I do believe that we as a humankind, we have to go to another planets from one perspective. From another one, it is very challenging. And I believe that mobile technologies will not play a huge role in, you know, going to Mars or living on Mars. Maybe some of them will, like I can imagine an astronaut on the Mars setting up the whole domestic thing, houses and so on, using iPads for, you know, something for like smart houses or smart Mars houses and so on. But you know, no 5G there, so no Apple devices belong there.
Yeah,
Imagine
GPS on Mars.
Yeah, like imagine downloading Xcode on Mars.
It takes half a year here on Earth, so what the hell?
And then Android Studio as well, right? When you like install the new NDK and it just downloads all the internet.
Yeah, and then Gradle goes offline, and you're like,
I was going to say that. Then you can't refresh your Gradle modules, and yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Elvin, would you like to add something to this bucket of things?
I think they already said everything, but I would totally imagine people using tablets for, let's say, drilling control operations. Why not? And I don't think that's going to be iPad. I think it's going to be Android.
Yeah, okay.
Fuchsia. It will be Fuchsia with Flutter.
Okay.
Fuchsia.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Fuchsia. Yeah.
Fuchsia. We were once told how to properly pronounce that, but obviously forgot. Okay, we have two
It's
more.
spelled in like a completely asinine way. So like, I completely understand the pronunciation.
Okay, Iryna, what do you think about this Mars travel? I mean, again, from the perspective of the user experience specialist. So, will mobile devices help those astronauts there, or?
Well, I'm pretty sure they should have some kind of radio communication at least to interact. Not sure if the mobile communication can work there. You will need the towers, the 5G towers, but you know, at the same time, Elon Musk has got this grand plan of having something like a satellite internet, and if he manages to get there, the possibility is that first expedition to Mars might also be accompanied with some satellites that will provide the internet. But I think for psychological accommodation of the astronauts, maybe it will make sense to, you know, have kind of allow them take their smartphones with them to be able to kind of scroll through memes before going to sleep in this kind of sense. But I mean, yeah, we want them to be as comfortable as possible. But there's this movie, The Martian, kind of gives a perspective of how this whole kind of household thing can work on Mars. So there isn't actually a room to take like less important things with the astronauts. And of course, by the time they land on Mars, the technology will be more advanced on Earth.
Yeah,
So this is the reason for them to rebel. You know, this could be like social unease or some kind of.
If you think waiting 2 years to upgrade your cell phone because your carrier won't reimburse you for it is annoying. Like, imagine taking 2 years to upgrade your cell phone because that's how long it actually takes to get to and from Mars.
Exactly. Yeah. So doesn't make much sense, but maybe as a in the form of just a small smart device, it does. But I don't think their lives are any, you know, can resemble whatever lives we lead here. Their lives will be totally different. Will they need mobile phones? Not sure.
Based on that movie, they should take more potatoes instead.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And duct tape, right?
You always need more potatoes and duct.
Yeah. Okay, Nastya, you are the last one, and I would like to ask you a specific question. So, will Martians need to care about the mobile security? I mean, like security of their mobile devices, whatever devices that would be? Yes, we know the answer is yes, but how do you think? What threats will they have?
So why are you asking me if you already know the answer? Okay, so I can imagine like a really, really cool threat. If I'm a hacker on Earth and I'm trying to hack a device in Mars, right? For example, to open the doors of Martian base, or like to close them, or to control the oxygen. Sorry, your Mars life story is ended.
So they will need protection from Earth, probably.
Well, I don't think that people living on Mars will be attacking another people on Mars, at least for some time while they're like a small community, but later, and maybe they will find someone who originally lives there, and they were like, hey, you're using QWERTY as your password. Sorry, you're not allowed on our planet anymore.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. That was an interesting talk, some like 10 years into the future from now. That's, again, thank you, everybody, for coming. And we would also like to mention that the guests from our audience who ask the questions, you will receive some small prizes from us, and the guys will be in contact with you. And one of the guys who will be in contact with you, it's our silent warrior of questions from the audience, Alexander Denisov, who was helping us hosting this talk and was absolutely invisible, but did a great job of helping us. And if you want to say something to our audience, like, feel free, and we will wrap up.
Thank you very much, folks. That was an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Interesting. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Anybody